Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Pod.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. I wanted to apologize to begin the episode here. We've been a little schedule-wise hard to get us to get our start and sit show, but I did not want to ruin the last few weeks here. I know we've been a little on and off with our start and sits. Things have been just busy, and life has just been a little busy, unfortunately, but I wanted to make sure we got in a good start and sit episode today here. Coach Tyler could not be here today just because I had something come up and he couldn't do it in the afternoon. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to get you guys a show today here. So we're going to start right here at the top, guys. We're going to go right through it. And if you're new to the show, if you're tuning in again, obviously you know how this works. We're going to go not team by team, but game by game, breaking down all the games and all the possible noticeable players for fantasy football. That's going to be a key thing. The noticeable players that you're going to want to start or sit, or just kind of an idea about their potential value in this week's coming matchup here. So that is what we're going to end up talking about today here, and we're going to get right into it in just a moment here. Again, thank you all for tuning in when you tune in. If you are tuning in live on our YouTube channel at the Fantasy Coaches, please feel free to ask a question, anything that you might want to do. I'll be here answering questions, but I will also be going through the games, hopefully within 40 minutes here, going through each game, talking about the noticeable players. So let's get things started here at the top, guys. And we're starting with the Las Vegas Raiders and the Miami Dolphins. Not the most interesting game, obviously. And if you guys know me, I'm a big Dolphins fan, but this is not the most interesting game for fantasy football through the entire weekend here. Quarterback wise, you're looking at Gardner Minshew as a QB3, has really kind of underperformed this season here, has not been the kind of like, oh man, he's throwing garbage time touchdowns, keeping him afloat for fantasy football. He's a QB3. On the Dolphins side, Tua, high-end QB2. I don't think there's the upside in this matchup to be considered a QB1 right now, just because the Raiders secondary has been pretty good this season, and Tua, through the last 4 weeks, only averaging 16 fantasy points a game. Running backs, Alexander Madison's interesting. I do like the potential for him, but he has kind of failed us at times when he's had favorable matchups. But Miami is a very favorable matchup here. I've allowed, an RB2 or better in every single week. I have him just below that high-end RB3. Wouldn't be surprised if he finished as an RB2. Zamir White, again, if they decide to want to run the ball in Vegas, maybe White gets some more work after the bye week here. Maybe they got him more involved. Who knows? Dolphin side of the ball, Devon Achane, mid RB1. Good, should be really solid, high upside player this week. Raiders have been a terrible team this season against running back this year here. They've allowed an RB1 in 5 straight games. Raheem Mostert, low-end wide RB3 here, should get some work in the backfield. They did say that he is still considered a starter for that Miami, even though Devon Achane is the obviously better player at this moment. You could throw Jalen Wright in there in deeper man leagues. There's potential there if he gets some work. Wide receiver-wise, the only wide receiver for the Raiders is just Kobe Myers. Mid wide receiver 3 here. Dolphins have been decent against wide receivers, but they've allowed some decent production to slot wide receivers here. He should be a fine flex play for fantasy football. Dolphin side, you're looking at Tyreek Hill. It's, again, the wrist injuries are concerned. The lack of production is concerning. I have him as a mid wide receiver too. The Raiders have been pretty good against wide receivers this season here. Haven't allowed a lot of production to wide receivers, mostly due to the run game being as bad as it is. I have him as a mid wide receiver too. So I think you still have to start him. Give him at least another week of attempting to produce for us in fantasy. Jalen Waddle, high wide receiver 4. I don't like him as much as a flex play. I'd probably keep him out of flex range if I could here. I'm not a huge guy on that. I'd probably sit him this week. Tight end wise, Brock Bowers still high end tight end 1. Miami's been pretty decent against tight ends, but Brock Bowers is just a different kind of beast in this Raiders offense, and he should get his work and be able to produce for us in fantasy. Jonnu Smith has a nice high-end, tight end 2 value here. If you're looking for a sleeper tight end this week, the Raiders have allowed 90 yards and a touchdown to tight ends in back-to-back weeks now. So over to the next game here, the Baltimore Ravens. This should be a really fun game. Obviously, hopefully it's another high-scoring game, but quarterback-wise, Lamar Jackson's obviously a high QB1. You're starting him almost no matter what. Russell Wilson does enter in that low-end QB1 situation that I think he's a pretty good start, even in a 1 QB league this week here. The Ravens have allowed tons of passing yards this season. Their secondary has been just unable to kind of stop anyone in the passing game this year, and Russ has a really great opportunity to do well. So I like Russell Wilson a lot this week here. He should be able to produce big numbers. Running back-wise, Derrick Henry, a high-end RB1. I mean, the matchup with the Steelers is tougher, but Derrick Henry has been able to just dominate matchups this season. He's probably going to get a touchdown in this game. He should be a good value for a high-end RB. Justice Hill, low-end wide receiver 3. Again, this game could turn into a shootout. Justice Hill has seen work in the receiving game, and in mostly PPR leagues, you're going to want to consider, Justice Hill as a potential flex option. Outside of that, it's really not someone I really want to go after, but this could be a high-scoring game, allowing Hill to have a workload. Another Steelers backfield, they're both RB3s to me. For the most part, the Ravens have been really good at stopping running backs this season. Haven't allowed a running back over 55 rushing yards this season. Najee Harris has been really good, but again, this Ravens defense have been solid. The most important part will be who gets the receiving work in the game. Jalen Warren was a little questionable going into this game on this coming Sunday here. If he is playing, he's someone I kind of do like slightly over Najee Harris in PPR leagues. But in half-point PPR, I still kind of give it the nod to Harris just because he's been so productive and seeing a higher workload in this offense. But both are not considered must-start options. If you're desperate, you need an RB to start this week. Sleeper options, not sleeper per se, but options at an RB2 spot. One of those guys could potentially fill in. For the wide receivers, you're looking at Zay Flowers, a solid low-end wide receiver 1. I think he bounces back in a big way this week here. Again, high-scoring matchup here. Steelers have been not so great against slot wide receivers this season. I like Zay Flowers a lot to be able to bounce back in this game here. I expect a big game from him. Rashard Bateman, kind of like a desperate flex option here, low-end wide receiver 4 play here. Again, you throw him in your lineup and you're kind of hoping for this to turn into a high-scoring game. That's the only way I think he ends up having a really good day. People might be questioning what's going on with Deontay Johnson. I just don't know what they're doing with him. Either he's not learning the offense well enough in time to get him on the field here. And again, this is a revenge game for him. Do they give him the ball a ton? Sure, maybe, but it's hard to predict that based on the production and the target share that is going in this Ravens offense. I probably wouldn't consider Johnson as anything as a low wide receiver 5, and you have to be pretty desperate as a flex play to throw him in this week. George Pickens, high wide receiver 1 this week. Love George Pickens this week here. Him and Russell Wilson have been a tandem that have been really good for fantasy football. He's been a wide receiver 1 ever since Russell Wilson's taken over at quarterback here. And in a matchup where the Ravens have allowed wide receiver 1s to dominate against them, George Pickens should have himself a really good day. Mike Williams is kind of like a deep sleeper option this week here. He only had that 1 catch, but it went for a touchdown. But again, if this turns into a shootout game here, Mike Williams has potential value. Maybe he catches a long one in this game here for a big yardage or even possibly a long touchdown. Tight end wise, Mark Andrews. I don't really like Mark Andrews as much this week. I know he's been really solid for fantasy football over the last month and a half now, which has been really good after a slow start, but he's been really poor against the Steelers in his career. Hasn't scored against them ever. Doesn't put up high yardage against them. Isaiah Likely is potentially coming back in this game here. So you could see his target share kind of cut this week where he's seeing, he's seen some like 5 or 6 targets most weeks. And if he ends up with 3, I wouldn't be super shocked. So I kind of was a low tight end 1. I think, you have to trust him enough because of what he's been producing, but the matchup doesn't scream Mark Andrews is going to have a great game. Pat Freiermuth, high-end tight end 2. I know it's been kind of hard to trust him this season. He's been really lacking in terms of production this year, but Ravens have not been good against tight ends. It's a very favorable matchup for him. Again, if this turns into a high-scoring game, Pat Freiermuth might see the rock a little bit more and be able to, see upwards of 6 or 7 targets in this game and be able to produce as a high-end tight end 2 for fantasy. So over to the next game, Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions. This should be a very one-sided game for fantasy football this week here. Mac Jones, QB3. I don't really want to trust him. What I saw last week out of him was terrible. Bad throwing on time, just not being able to stay comfortable in that pocket. The Lions have been solid this year and expect Mac Jones to probably throw a couple picks in this game here. Jared Goff, low end QB1. I'd have him higher. It's just that I could really see this game turning into allowing the running backs to dominate, and kind of Jared Goff has been doing what he's been doing, where it's 180 yards and a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, but like they're up 45-3, and it's because of the run game. So Jared Goff's a low end QB1. I like him this week here, but would I be surprised if he has a bad game? Not that much. Running back wise, obviously Tank Bigsby's out this week, so Travis Etienne for me gets a nice bump. And Mac Jones likes to check the ball down, and I think Travis Etienne will see a bunch of targets in this game here. The Lions have actually been really not good against running backs in recent weeks here, and allowing high yardage on the ground here. And I think Travis Etienne with a bigger workload, because I don't think Dearness Johnson is going to take enough away to keep Travis Etienne having a bigger workload this week. He should be a really good RB2 for us in fantasy. Lions side of the ball, Dave Montgomery, high-end RB2. Again, I like him every single week. He has a chance to score a touchdown each and every single week. You should be happy about him as a starter. Same with Jahmyr Gibbs, mid RB1. He's got the receiving ability, that big upside on that. He's been the better runner as of late in the last few weeks here. Solid running back for this fantasy week. Wide receivers, it's really hard to trust anyone outside of Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jaguars. Like Parker Washington, Gabe Davis, I don't really trust them in fantasy football as a top 60 option. Like maybe one of them does end up jumping into a top 60 play, but it's really hard to tell who that's really going to be. Maybe Parker Washington, but Brian Thomas Jr. is a decent flex play this week here. I mean, he's going to see the yardage. The Lions have allowed wide receiver ones to dominate against them. So Brian Thomas, as long as Mac Jones can get him the ball, he should be fine for fantasy as a flex play. Lions side of the ball, I still like Amon-Ra St. Brown as a high wide receiver 1. The upside that he offers every single week, and he continues to have this touchdown streak. I think it's 7 straight games now with a touchdown. I love him this week here. He should see his normal workload, especially with Sam Laporta out. Could even see more targets his way. Jameson Williams, low wide receiver 3. Again, solid, decent flex option for you in fantasy. Hoping for the big play with him. That's what we were missing out of him last week. Didn't get the big play ability for him in that game there against the Texans. That's what you need from Jameson Williams to really get him going in fantasy football. So solid flex play, hoping for more upside, more of a boom or bust play. Tight end wise, Evan Ingram, a little low on Evan Ingram. I probably consider him even lower than the low end tight end 1. I just didn't like what I saw from Mac Jones, his ability to get the ball to his wide receivers. Again, maybe the first game jitters, kind of getting that off his shoulder, but Lions have been pretty solid against tight ends this year. And even Evan Ingram hasn't really been thriving in fantasy football in the last few weeks here now. So I like him as a low end 1 just because of the talent, but the production might not be there for him in this week. Brock Wright is going to fill in for Sam Laporta, more of a blocking tight end, but has had some decent outings at times when he's been able to see the starting role. There was a short time when between the TJ Hawkinson and the Sam Laporta lifetime that Wright had some decent play, but low end tight end 2, probably not a starter in most formats. All right. LA Rams and the New England Patriots here. This should be an interesting game. Hopefully this is an interesting game. Hopefully it's not like the Dolphins game and the Rams where it's like thought to be high scoring, but ended up being like a real shit show. Matthew Stafford, mid QB2 here. Again, Patriots have been pretty decent against quarterbacks for the most part this year. And for me, it's kind of a question mark if Matthew Stafford can keep this up, if he keeps continue. As long as he doesn't see any pressure, Matthew Stafford should be good. If he gets pressure, he's probably not going to be as good for us in fantasy. Drake May, it says QB2, but he's a high QB2 for me, honestly, this week. His rushing ability is something that I really like about him. And as long as he's playing a full game and can see that rushing workload, he should be a solid, sleeper play, strong QB2 in Superflex leagues. Running backs here, Kyren Williams. For me, Kyren Williams is just kind of fallen down a little bit in the last few weeks here. I think he's still a solid high-end QB2, but if he doesn't end up scoring touchdowns, and that's going to be the key thing, if he can score a touchdown, he hasn't done that in the last 2 weeks now, he doesn't really see the production for fantasy football that you really want. He'll get you like 12, 13 points, but it's off the ground, off a couple catches, but the touchdown is really what makes him a high-end player, and I kind of see this game turning into where the Patriots kind of find a way to stop Kyren Williams, and he doesn't have that high-end RB1 upside that I really like. Ramondre Stevenson, more of a high-end RB3 here. The Rams have kind of kept opposing running backs under RB19 in 4 straight weeks now. Stevenson has been solid, playing a little bit better as of late here, but I think this game turns into more of the Drake May show where it's just more passing, and Stevenson, if he doesn't catch the touchdown this week here, might not be great for him in fantasy. More of like a boomer bust play for me. Wide receiver wise, Cooper Kupp, high-end wide receiver 1, Puka Nacua, mid wide receiver 1. I like both those guys this week. They're starting in my lineup no matter what here. Christian Gonzalez is going to probably cover one of them, but they're probably going to switch them on and off of Gonzalez throughout the entire game to give them both opportunities to see the lesser of the opportunity in the offense, at least defense in the Patriots side of the ball. So look for both these wide receivers to be high-end players for you this week. Demarcus Robinson, low wide receiver 5. He kind of showed us that with Puka Nacua back on a full workload. Robinson is going to be more of a boom or bust play. He's not going to be a consistent option like he was 3 weeks ago. So Demario Douglas is the only wide receiver from the Patriots I really want to trust. Like maybe Jalen Polk does something, maybe Kayshon Boutte does something, but for me, it's Demario Douglas, and he's done well enough with Drake May when he plays a full game in his workload. He's going to get you 8 or 9 points. Probably more of a floor play this week here. As a high-end wide receiver floor, he's going to get you 10 fantasy points, and you're either happy or disappointed with that performance there. But as a flex play, if you're looking for a solid, hopefully floor, Demario Douglas. Tight end wise, Davis Allen has playing a lot more lately, and he showed that last week when he was dominated the workload and the snaps over Kobe Parkinson. Kobe Parkinson is basically droppable in fantasy now, and it's Davis Allen is kind of taking over as the young guy, seeing more work in this offense. But Patriots been pretty good against tight ends this year, outside my top 24. Hunter Henry, mid tight end 1. I expect a big bounce right from him. The Rams have allowed a tight end over 40 yards in 6 of their 10 games this year, and Hunter Henry is going to see the workload in this offense, and he should be able to probably lead his team in targets this week in a matchup where I think he ends up doing very well. Next up, Browns and Saints. First off the board here, quarterback-wise, both Jameis Winston and Derek Carr, both mid-QB2s. I like Derek Carr slightly better. The Browns secondary has been really a weak spot for them in the recent weeks here, and I think Carr, if he can get the ball to some of his really bad wide receivers, or at least get close to the end zone where he throws a couple touchdowns, I think he should end up having a really good day for fantasy football. Jameis Winston, the Saints are interesting. They have been decent against, quarterbacks this year, but seeing Marshawn Lattimore go to the Commanders here, it really will test the secondary to see how well Jameis Winston only outside of that one game really wasn't that good. So far this season here. So I'm a little torn on making him like a high-end QB2. For me, he's more of a mid QB2. And until I can kind of see more of that consistency from him, you're going to expect a boom or bust play from Winston. For the running backs, Nick Chubb. I like Nick Chubb a lot this week. I'm really hoping that the bye week kind of got this offense more up to speed for Nick Chubb and gives him an opportunity to be able to produce in fantasy football. He's going to see the workload on the ground at least, and we've seen the Saints kind of been able to not stop running backs this year, especially in the last month and a half. They've allowed an RB to finish 14 or better in six straight games now, so I think Nick Chubb can end up having a really good game. Jerome Ford, more of a mid-high. I probably should have him as a low RB4 because I really don't trust him in this offense with Nick Chubb back here, and you're not seeing Jameis Winston check the ball down as much, so Ford losing that PPR value that he had last year in the early portion of the season. So probably more of a low-end RB4, even though I have him as a high. Alvin Kamara, mid RB1. There should be no issues with that. He's going to see the workload in that offense there. Wide receivers. Cedric Tillman. You get another week of Cedric Tillman being probably really good for fantasy football. Whether it's garbage time or this team ends up being a weird shootout, Cedric Tillman should see a workload in this game here. He's going to be a low-end wide receiver 2 for me. I like him a lot this week here. Like I said, the Browns secondary has not been good against wide receivers in the recent weeks here, and he's definitely someone who's intriguing me for sure. Again, posting wide receiver 1s, 100 yards in 4 of the last 5 games. The Browns have let up. So Jerry Jeudy, solid high-end wide receiver 4. Elijah Moore, solid low-end 4. I think one of them also ends up being able to be flex-worthy. Jerry Jeudy in the slot, someone the Saints have given up slot wide receiver yardage to them. 95 yards or more in 4 of the last 6 games here. So Jerry Jeudy does do well, I think, this week for fantasy. And so does Elijah Moore potentially. They have done increased their points per game in the last month of the season here with Jameis Winston at quarterback. MVS is the only wide receiver I would even consider for the Saints here. And I don't know if I even like that, to be honest. I mean, you're throwing up a dart throw for MVS in this week here. It's like you're hoping for the best. You must be struggling at wide receiver or flex option if you're going to start MVS. But again, he could have another 100 yards and a touchdown very easily in this game here. So for the tight ends, David Njoku, high tight end 1, like him pretty much this week here. He's going to be probably one of the higher target leaders in this Browns offense here. And then tight ends for the Saints, Jawan Johnson, low tight end 2. Taysom Hill, high end tight end 2. Again, I'm not really thrilled about most of this offense, but hopefully Taysom Hill can get a touchdown here or there. But hopefully it doesn't take away from Alvin Kamara. So over to the next game here, Colts Jets. We have Anthony Richardson returning to quarterback this week here, and I'm not really having a high expectation for Anthony Richardson in his first game back here. Again, he didn't show something well enough for us to trust him coming out the gates. You take it as like the Bryce Young situation here. Hopefully he learned to do something a little bit better in that 2-game stint that he didn't play in. But again, I'm not trusting him. He doesn't throw the ball well. You have to assume, if anything, he's going to see a big rushing workload. The Jets have a lot of rushing touchdown in 4 of the last 5 games to a quarterback. So maybe Richardson scores a touchdown that way. Rodgers, I like Rodgers this week. He's a high QB2. Colts have been allowing a passer over 280 yards in 3 straight games here. Rodgers hopefully kind of can get back on track at a home matchup where he's been a little bit more better at compared to on the road this season here. So I like Rodgers hopefully to bounce back. Jonathan Taylor, low RB1, have no issue with him. So is Brees Hall, low RB1s. That doesn't mean I don't like them at all. They're just, I think there's some upside that might be capped to some extent, especially with Richardson back and obviously with Hall and that passing offense for the Jets. But I like them a lot this week. They should both be in starting lineups. Braylon Allen, RB4, he's fine. Probably will need a touchdown to do anything great for fantasy. For the wide receivers for the Colts, the only one I really like is Josh Downs. And I don't even like Josh Downs this week, to be honest. I mean, mid wide receiver 3, best is a flex play, but like Michael Pittman Jr., I don't really want to trust him he's a high wide receiver 5 at best. Alec Pierce, low wide receiver 5. I have AD Mitchell in there too, but if Michael Pittman's playing, AD Mitchell kind of goes away for fantasy football. So, but Colts wide receiver is not something I really want. We have a question in the chat here from the Schmitty. Would you trade Mont for Ken Walker? I would. I like that play, honestly. I think Ken Walker still has a lot more upside in his game here. And what it really is to me, it comes down to is the receiving role in the offense here. Ken Walker could easily see 6 or 7 targets in any given week here in the Seattle offense, while Mont gets limited to Jahmyr Gibbs. I like it. I think Ken Walker ends up doing much better as the season goes on. So it's a good trade. I like that. Jet side of the ball. Garrett Wilson, low wide receiver 1, has been fantastic over the last month of the season, really performing much better in fantasy football, 17 fantasy points per game. Devontae Adams, more of a high wide receiver 2. He might be a little high, to be honest, where I have him at, but I think the matchup is good enough for him to be able to produce in this game. Tight ends, Colts, top 24 tight ends. Yeah, no, there's no top 24 tight end for the Colts. They're all outside the top 24. Tyler Conklin's a low tight end too. The Colts have been really favorable matchup for tight ends, but Tyler Conklin has not really produced for us in fantasy. So next game, Minnesota Vikings and the Tennessee Titans here. All right. This game should be interesting, hopefully, here. I mean, we're hoping that the Vikings offense kind of gets back on track after a very poor week last week here. And we kind of saw that what we thought last week was supposed to be a cake matchup, but it ended up not being a cake matchup for the Vikings. But they had to pull out the win. Sam Darnold, I like him as a mid QB2. It's really hard to trust Sam Darnold right now. After what we saw last week here, the matchup just was really favorable for him to produce, and he failed us. And the Titans have been kind of more of an average matchup. I mean, Darius Sneed isn't playing this week, so he might have a little bit more favorable play there. But Sam Darnold is just really hard to trust him this week for fantasy football, especially with the run game for the Vikings this week being a favorable matchup. Will Levis, QB3. I want to see it again. Yeah, it was great that he put up over 23 fantasy points last week here. But again, I want to see him do it again before I really rank him as inside of a top 24 play for us in fantasy football. So, because the Vikings have allowed a league high 15 interceptions. So expect Will Levis to get picked off at least once or twice. For the running backs, Aaron Jones, high end RB2 here. Titans have allowed a running back to score in 4 straight games here. I like the workload he's going with. I don't care about the injury. I'm not overly concerned about that. He's going to get his workload in this game. Cam Akers, high-end RB4. He might see some work too, but not enough to trust him as a fair play, but as a desperate play. Tony Pollard, low RB2. Tajay Spears, low RB3. It really will depend with these Titans running backs how this workload's going to go. We saw last week where the Titans were behind a big time, and Tajay Spears got a lot of work in the passing game. And then the week before that, we saw Tony Pollard see more of that workload as they were kind of more of a neutral game script at that point here. So it really will depend on how this game works. Pollard's fine, but I think it's more of a not a ceiling play. You're hoping that he does, but you're expecting probably 8 fantasy points, and you're like, damn, I really don't want that. But that's what Tony Pollard's probably going to offer you. Tyjae Spears, again, more of a risky play. You have to hope that he sees more involvement in the passing game. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, high wide receiver 1, nothing to say there. Jordan Addison is like a mid wide receiver 4. Really hasn't been playing that well as of late, just 8 fantasy points per game, and that's just due to the passing game not being very efficient this season here. I'm not really thrilled to want to go after and start him this week here, but I mean, again, more of a desperate play. Calvin Ridley, for me, he's a high wide receiver 2. They're going to continue to find ways to get Calvin Ridley the ball. They paid him a lot of money to be there. He's been producing, averaging almost 17 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks here. Calvin Ridley is someone I really want to get in lineups this week. I think Minnesota is why their secondary has helped turn the ball over a lot. It still allows a good amount of yardage, so Calvin Ridley should be pretty good. And then Nick Westbrook-Ikine, touchdown machine. And again, as a low wide receiver 5, you're looking for a boom or bust desperate play, and he might be able to offer that for you. Tight end wise, TJ Hawkinson's a mid tight end 1, has been really good since being back in the starting lineup after being away, averaging 10 fantasy points per game. I like him. Unfortunately, Chig Okonkwo is averaging under 5 fantasy points per game, and I just don't trust him, even though the Vikings have been a matchup that is kind of favorable for tight ends, but Okonkwo is just not someone I can trust right now in fantasy. All right, Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears right now. This should be hopefully, this was supposed to be a really good matchup, but I don't know. Obviously, we know the Bears changed the offensive coordinator. We don't know what's going to happen with this offense here. He does have a history of working with running backs, so it could be a game where the running game gets going again this week. So we'll have to wait and see about that. So Jordan Love is a low QB1. I like him still a lot this week here. I think there's upside in his game here. As he hopefully is much healthier after a bye, which he desperately needed for fantasy right now. Caleb Williams, I don't really have much faith in Caleb Williams. Maybe this is the week he bounces back with a new OC, but not really wanting to trust this quarterback situation right now in Chicago. He's low QB2 at best. Josh Jacobs, high RB2. Like him, he should see the workload. He's going to see the groundwork. He's going to probably have an opportunity to score a touchdown in this week's matchup here, averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. So DeAndre Swift, I like him as a mid QB2, RB2. I like that he should have an opportunity to see a workload in this matchup, and I think the new OC is going to get the running game more involved to kind of help open up the passing game here. Packers have a lot of 70-yard running back in 5 of the last 6 games. Roschon Johnson's mid RB4 desperate play. Wide receiver wise, for me, Jaden Reed is still a mid to high wide receiver 2. I still love him with Jordan Love when they're on the field together. There's big things that can happen very easily here. Romeo Doubs, a mid wide receiver 4. I think he probably should be a little higher just due to his recent success in this offense recently. Christian Watson, wide receiver 5. Ontavian Wicks, don't really have him in my starting lineup this week here. So another question in the chat here from 3001 Heads. Hey, what's going on? I'm in the dirt this week. Need help. Pick one, running back and flex. Rashad Bateman, Ricky Pearsall, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins here. Oh, yeah, this one's going to be a tough one for sure here. Running back wise, obviously going to start one of these 2 running backs here. I'm probably going to lean J.K. Dobbins a little bit because he's going to see at least the receiving work, even though it's not great. He's only averaging 3 targets per game, but he's still the RB1 for that team, even with Gus Edwards back, and he's going to see the receiving work where I can't say the same for Najee Harris. And I think that game turns into a more of a shootout where I think Cincinnati and the Chargers kind of a more neutral script. So it allows J.K. Dobbins to continue to see the rock on the ground, plus also see targets in the air. So I'm going to say J.K. Dobbins a running back. And then flex, I like Ricky Pearsall. I think he is the safer play this week here. I think you're looking at 4 catches for 60 yards from Ricky Pearsall. And if that's what you need, I think Pearsall is the better way to go for in fantasy this week. If you're looking for upside, that's the Rashard Bateman play, but it's also a big boom or bust play. If you need a boom and can handle a bust too, Rashard Bateman's the flex option. But if not, I think Ricky Pearsall and J.K. Dobbins are in my lineup for me this week based on this here. For the Bears wide receivers, I'm not really high on them this week at all. The Packers have been really good this year against the passing game here. Their whole team is looking healthy following the bye here. DJ Moore is a high wide receiver 4. Keenan Allen's a low wide receiver 4. Romeo Doubs a mid wide receiver 4. Again, not feeling great about this option here at this point here. Tight end ones, Tucker Kraft is a mid tight end 1. Cole Kmet is a low tight end 2. Again, both these guys are good plays for fantasy in terms of tight ends. I like Kraft a little bit better. He's just been in a better offense. Kmet has a favorable matchup this week. I like Kmet this week. Packers have a lot of tight end 1 in 3 of the last 5 games, but again, it's hard to trust to see if this Packers offense is really going to do well. And because of the tight end position, Cole Kmet kind of leans in that tight end 1 category. So over to the next game here. Atlanta Falcons and the Broncos were in the afternoon games now. Almost done, guys. Kirk Cousins, low QB2. Denver's been really good against against quarterbacks this year. And Kirk Cousins, really just dealing with an injury himself right now, currently. Obviously playing in this game, but it's really hard to trust him. He really hasn't really done as much as we really wanted him to do in fantasy in the recent weeks here. I mean, he's only averaging like 17 fantasy points a game here. And I think this is just not going to be a great game for him on the road in Denver. Bo Nix, I love Bo Nix a lot here. I think Atlanta gives up a lot of passing touchdowns, 2 quarterbacks in the last 6 weeks here, at least 2 in each of the last 6 weeks. Bo Nix, I think, kind of has a more of a bounce back game after kind of being more of an average play last week, and expect the rushing ability that Bo Nix offers for fantasy football. Bijan, mid RB1, should be really good in this game. I like Bijan a lot in this game here. Broncos have a lot of receiving work, 2 running backs this year, so I like him. Tyler Algier, I like him as an mid RB3. I think he can offer you some play as a potential touchdown play. That's going to be key for him. He gets involved in this Falcons offense. Now, the Broncos side of the ball, this should be interesting here because the Falcons have a lot of RB1 in 3 of the last 4 games. But who's going to be the RB there? That's going to be the big question here. We're going to assume it's Audric Estime, the both low-end RB3s. I think Estime gets the groundwork and Javonte gets more of the passing down work. And it will depend if Denver's behind, then Javonte might see more work. If Denver's ahead, you might see more Audric Estime in this game. And one of them might end up being an RB2 for us in fantasy at that week's over. But really hard to trust either one of them this week because I just don't know what the workload is going to be like. And again, neither one has shown us to be fairly productive in fantasy. Wide receivers, Drake London, high wide receiver 2. Little concerned of him playing against Patrick Surtain in this game here. It could be a bust game for a guy like Drake London. Darnell Mooney, low wide receiver 2. Again, I'm fine with him. I don't think Patrick Surtain's going to go on Mooney all that much here, so Mooney should be able to produce for us in fantasy this week. Ray McCloud's a boomer bust, desperate wide receiver 5. Courtland Sutton, I'm okay with Courtland Sutton. I like him a lot. He's been producing a lot better in recent weeks here, averaging almost 14 fantasy points per game. I like the target share he's getting. Devon Veal, if you have to pick another Broncos wide receiver to throw out there, he's seeing more of like a PPR play. If you're in PPR leagues, get your maybe 5 receptions in this game here. As a low-end wide receiver 5, desperate play. Kyle Pitts is a low tight end 1. I'm a little concerned with Kyle Pitts just slightly here. Broncos have only allowed 1 tight end 1 in the last 5 weeks. So for me, Kyle Pitts is is a danger play as a tight end 1. Adam Trautman outside the top 24. Don't really trust any tight ends for the Broncos. I don't know who's the guy. 1 week is Adam Trautman, 1 week is Lucas Carroll, 1 week is Nate Akeed. Don't trust any of the tight ends there for Denver. Seattle and San Fran. This should hopefully be an interesting afternoon game here. Geno Smith is low QB2. He struggled last time against the 49ers. Now they're home. Smith hasn't been a guy who's thrown tons of touchdowns in a per game basis here. I don't really like him this week that much. Brock Purdy's a low QB1. He produced very well last time against Seattle, and I like him to be able to bounce back with most of his weapons healthy outside of Brandon Ayuk now. So we have a question to chat from Eric. Hey, I need to fill a QB spot in a flex play this week. QB options are May, Richardson, and Geno. Well, the way I have it right now, I have Drake May as my top QB, and I think I trust him the most out of this group here. Geno is probably my least trusted out of this group for the most part, just in terms of upside. A-Rich, I mean, there's tons of upside with A-Rich, but the floor is very low. I'd probably lean Drake May this week. At tight end, Knox, Hill, and Freiermuth. Man. I would probably lean Dawson Knox this week here. The Chiefs have not been good against tight ends this year. And obviously, we're already lost Keon Coleman for the week for the Bills. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid's out, and Amari Cooper's kind of banged up right now. Dawson Knox might end up being the better play out of all these guys. Taysom Hill's fine, but it's just so up and down with his production and Freiermuth. I know there's upside there this week, but I think I trust the passing offense for Buffalo more just due to the way that they've been playing lately. So. And for flex, Kayshon Boutte, Estime, or whichever tight end doesn't start. Full point PPR. If it's full point PPR, Estime is probably much out for me because I don't see him seeing any receiving work. Boutte, I'd probably give Freiermuth or Hill to play. Freiermuth probably the safer play. Hill is probably upside play depending on what you need for yourself in fantasy this week here, but I'd probably leave Butte out on the bench and Estime. All right, running backs, Ken Walker, low-end RB1. He should be really good for this game here. Had a lot of receptions last time. Zach Charbonnet, mid RB4. Obviously, CMC's are RB1 very easily. Jordan Mason, I didn't even put him on here because the workload that we saw from last week is just embarrassing that how much CMC is getting that workload in there in San Francisco. DK Metcalf, low wide receiver 2. The 49ers only have allowed 2 wide receivers over wide receiver 2 finish or better in the last 5 weeks here. DK Metcalf, I'm a little concerned with him. Still want to put him as a low end of QB2. Tyler Lockett's low wide receiver 5. JSN mid wide receiver 3. Deebo Samuels, I like him a lot this week. Seattle's secondary has been shaky. I like him as a mid wide receiver 1. Juwan Jennings, I like him a lot this week. He's a low wide receiver 2. I think he should be able to produce for us in fantasy football. He's been the guy who's been very consistent once giving the starting role. Ricky Pearsall, like I said, high-end wide receiver 3. I still like him a lot for fantasy. I think he's more of a flex play, obviously, than anything else. AJ Bonner, outside the top 24. He starts for Noah Fant being out, but San Fran's been really good against tight ends. George Kittle, high tight end 1. Seattle's been terrible against tight ends over the last few weeks now. I expect him to be able to bounce back in a big way. So, all right, Kansas City, Buffalo here. We're getting to the end here, guys. Kansas City, Buffalo. This should be a really fun game here. Whether or not it's high scoring for fantasy, it should be a really fun game. Josh Allen has always done very well against the Chiefs on the regular season. So I expect him to be a high QB1. Patrick Mahomes, I think he's been playing much better than this week to trust him as a low QB2, averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game. So I like him a lot this week here for sure. Next up here for me, looking at the running backs here, Kareem Hunt. Buffalo has been very favorable to running backs, especially in the receiving game, 50 yards to running backs in 3 of the last 6 games here. Kareem Hunt showed us a receiving game that he hasn't really shown us this year. So far last week when having a big receiving role last week. So I do like Kareem Hunt a lot as a low-end RB1. Samaje Perine a mid RB4 in PPR leagues. James Cook, I have him as a mid RB2, and it's going to be really important for him to get the receiving work this week here. I'm hoping that he does get that because if not, Chiefs have not allowed a running back over 60 rushing yards this season. Ray Davis, mid RB4. Of course, I didn't put anything for these guys here, but DeAndre Hopkins, I'm doing it on the spot there, guys. So here we go. DeAndre Hopkins for me. I mean, I have Hopkins as a mid wide receiver 2. He's kind of come along in this offense. Buffalo has been really bad against wide receivers, allowing 5 receivers over 60 yards in the last 3 weeks here. Xavier Worthy, I have him more as a low wide receiver 4. It's been hard to trust him in fantasy football. He's just not seeing the production that you would want from a player with his speed and talent. Khalil Shakir, I have him as a high wide receiver 3. Should be really solid for us in fantasy. Amari Cooper, mid wide receiver 4. Curtis Samuel outside my top 60. I know Keon Coleman's up there, but that's my mistake. Travis Kelce, still like him as a high tight end 1. Dawson Kincaid. That's the name to remember. Dawson Kincaid. Oh, God. I thought I fixed that. Sorry, guys. Mid tight end 2. Like I said, sleeper tight end this week here. Has a lot of upside for fantasy football. So. And over to the night game here. All right, almost done, guys. Cincinnati Bengals and Chargers here. You're looking at Joe Burrow as a mid QB1, Justin Herbert mid QB1. This should be a really fun game for both quarterbacks here. Like them a lot. Joe Burrow has been really good. Justin Herbert's really come along in the last couple of weeks for fantasy football. Chase Brown mid RB2 here. The Chargers have been a little more tough with running backs this year, but Chase Brown has been seeing a receiving role that's really big. Khalil Herbert, really not trusting him. I like Jacob Dobbins still as a low RB2 here. You should see the workload in this offense here to be able to be productive for fantasy football. Gus Edwards is like a high RB3 just because of maybe potential touchdown for him this week. Wide receivers, Jamar Chase, mid wide receiver 1. I still like him a lot of upside this week in fantasy, especially with T. Higgins coming back. Higgins is more of a high wide receiver 3. Chargers have been good against tight ends, wide receivers this year, so I'm kind of a little concerned with him. Ladd McConkey is a high wide receiver 3. I like him more this week here over T. Higgins if I had to start between the two because I think the Bengals secondary has been really bad against tight ends, especially wide receivers, especially wide receivers that play in the slot. Quentin Johnston, low wide receiver 3. I think there's a lot of upside for Quentin Johnston this week. Josh Palmer's a boomer bust wide receiver 5. Mike Gesicki's a tight end 2, high end tight end 2. He's kind of someone I have issues with this week in fantasy football because of T. Higgins being back. I don't really trust him that much. And Will Disley has a lot of sleeper appeal as a tight end Bengals have been really bad against tight ends this season. So, and last but not least, Monday Night Football, Houston Texans, Dallas Cowboys here. This is Coach Tyler's team here. CJ Stroud is a high tight end. Oh God. As you can see, guys, I'm struggling here at the end with me talking for almost 40 minutes. CJ Stroud is a high QB2 here. I don't have him as QB1 because I think this could be a really high running game here, allowing Joe Mixon to go nuts against the Cowboys defense. So I'm a little concerned about that. Cooper Rush, I still don't expect to bounce back. QB3, like I said, Joe Mixon, Dallas run defense. Give me Joe Mixon as a high-end RB2. Rico Dowling has kind of been confirmed that he is the starter now for Dallas. He is the guy here, and I like him as a low-end RB2 here. I like him to still be able to produce, especially with his role in the receiving game. Zeke's outside my top 48. Nico Collins is returning this week, looking healthy. High-end wide receiver 1. Tank Dell, low wide receiver 3. I don't have CeeDee Lamb as a wide receiver 1 this week here. More of a wide receiver 2 after last week's showing. I need Cooper Rush to show me that he can get the ball to CeeDee Lamb before I trust him back as a wide receiver 1. Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver 5. Tight ends, Dallas, Dalton Schultz, low tight end 2. Jake Ferguson, mid tight end 2. Not really thrilled with either of those tight ends, honestly, for fantasy football. So, but that is going to wrap up week 11, guys. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys to death and didn't talk too much. I mean, I did talk too much. I talked for 40 minutes straight, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, please check out the Fantasy Coaches as you can on our YouTube channel. Like I said, if you watch on a live, I do a really great slideshow for us, visual thing to kind of look and break down all the fantasy relevant players each and every week. We'll be back on Monday to talk waiver wires and from the week 11 games and talking about that stuff here. As always, go check out our Instagram, our TikTok, our Twitter, our Facebook, wherever we are, our Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please go like and review as much as possible. We do this to help you guys out in fantasy football. Just going to give you as much advice as possible. And yeah, I thank you guys all for tuning in and listening. Hopefully your week 11 goes well. Playoffs are coming soon, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Tune in until next time, everyone, and have a great one.
Back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of Clark Kents. I've been feeling super duper. How the heck they know the future? Come with me, don't be a loser. Grass is green like Koopa Scoopers. Clueless analysts don't do the half.